the New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. Today, very pleased to have Warwick Gray joining me. How are you, Warwick?
I'm really well, thank you, Paul. Great to see you again after many, many years of knowing you.
Yeah. Look, actually, we must take a walk to the room next door afterwards, because it looks out on a place that I don't know if my memory serves me correctly, but it used to be the Wang New Zealand building.
Yes, indeed.
And that's probably my first recollection of talking to you, possibly, because it was decades ago. So
Yes,
memory can be a bit hazy. But anyway, so we looked down on what was the Wang building from our window. Great to catch up. Maybe you can just fill listeners in a little bit on where you fit into this big wide world of tech. You have a very long history in the technology sector here in New Zealand. But what are you up to at the moment?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. That's great. So I've got a long and varied career, as you know. Like, I have a standard policy to be like tech, and that's be brief, be bright, be gone. So I've had very many different roles over the years, but initially it began with Renaissance Software many years ago, obviously distributing some of the initial early tech that helped companies enable their businesses. And one of the things we learned how to do was to sort of destroy the past, if you like. So things like photolithography, things like typesetting were basically industries in their own right, which we single-handedly destroyed at that time. So in terms of hype cycles, it's quite nice to sort of look back and see how, even at a local level, anyone can really be engaged with the way we change lives with tech. At the moment, I'm part of a group of things that I'm doing, but we're going to talk today a couple of them. But my brother and I kept a piece of the Renaissance legacy business in terms of a software development company, which emerged into a company called ProjectPartner. It really is looking at the way that people manage their time and how they capture the time spent on projects and make money from them. So we normally call that category project cost accounting. It's a bit boring, so I tend to talk to clients and say, do you really know what people do with their time?
There you go. Yeah, this is pretty important to know.
It is. And I think, through the talk today, we'll be sort of referring a bit to just how important it is that we make the most of time, whether it's to do with your business or whether it's working with others. It's very important for owners to know what projects are on track, how they're making money from them, which of their employees are more profitable than others based on the efforts they put into the different jobs that they're given. But we know, if we look back over history, just how many tech projects have gone so off track and so far off track that you really wonder how that could be possible. And fundamentally, it's still quite a tricky thing to do. And most of our big enterprise or government clients pay us really just to do that one little thing, which is get people to put their time into a time sheet.
Yeah.
I think that's quite unique in software companies, not trying to be bigger than everybody else, but just to do the one thing really, really well. So that's what ProjectPartner does.
Cool. And we'll delve into CompTIA as well later on. But before we sort of jump into the tech news of the week, big thank you to our show partners, Vodafone, who are soon to be 1NZ, 2 Degrees, Spark, HP, and Gorilla Technology. Probably the big sort of local news, and I'm not sure that we actually have covered it off over the last couple of weeks, but it's got bigger, as the Latitude Financial Group situation across Australia and New Zealand, and initially it was clear that they'd been compromised, that somebody had broken in and stolen data. Now it's on the sort of bigger scale. We're talking 8 million or so people impacted, and I guess that's why it's been become part of the mainstream news cycle. I was discussing it this morning on TVNZ's breakfast show, but there's really been a whole lot of coverage around it. What are your thoughts when you hear these sorts of stories? Because it seems to just keep coming. And in fact, I was having a quiet chat with a general manager of a smaller to medium business in the last couple of days, who quietly told me, "Oh, we were hit with XYZ because our managed service provider, were hit late last year, and that was something that you don't necessarily hear about in the media a lot. A lot of those that are impacted, but
Mm.
obviously we are just continuing to hear these things, and it does seem as though we're still sort of struggling to to cover the basics reasonably well, or a lot of organisations are, and of course we know that you can never be 100% perfect on this front, but seems as though we're just still seeing too many issues.
Yeah, I think that as individuals, we're reluctant to not give up the information that we're asked to do. In fact, you can't even engage with many of these companies if you don't. They make it very, very complicated and tricky to become a subscriber. In terms of Latitude, I mentioned earlier, I did help with the branding of one of their sub companies, and it's gone on to big things. But in terms of doing that by signing up, I have probably become a victim on that list. I didn't do driver's license or anything, but I'm always surprised at how many emails I've had of recent times letting me know that the company has been breached. I think one was Ticketmaster, the ticketing agency, and they had to sort of look into what happened, and they apologized, but they don't really step up and help the people that have been their core audience to know what to do. What should they do? So I think Latitude's done a good job of fronting up to some degree, but in the end, they still have lost data. And in terms of the industry and how it's set up, there's no excuses for that today. No matter what firewalls they have, or the endpoint protection that's been broken, or the breaching of their cyber, security model. And I think it's going to be a big subject for the future as we look to see what repercussions individuals can do to potentially not sue them, but obviously they've got to take more responsibility.
Yeah, it does seem as though there still needs to be some legislative action that brings more accountability, whether it's at the director level or what have you, and certainly we've seen there being an increased weight on of responsibility on directors when it comes to health and safety in recent years, data privacy. To a degree, but cybersecurity still seems to be, not. And of course, cybersecurity and data privacy are linked, of course, when an organisation is compromised these days, and unfortunately, in a lot of cases, that does lead to data leaks. So, yeah, not a great incident. I guess what I always hope with these things is every time we hear this news that it just raises that question. What can we do for those that are hearing the news? What can we do to improve our risk profile from a cybersecurity perspective? Where are we at? What are we doing? And obviously things might move a bit quicker if there was legislation in there, as well that included hefty fines and so on. But the news in itself, hopefully, is prodding people along. One of the interesting ones here was data going back 17 years. So they've Latitude have held on to data that, when you look at it, do they need to be keeping that data? And yeah, I'm curious even around some of the data that they do hold, and we've seen this with some of the other incidents where it's documents such as a passport or a driver license that has been taken. It does raise some questions around, do you really have to hold a copy of those documents? And so there might need to be some work done in those regards as well. I would have thought that you should be able to treat it in some ways like a credit card, right? Most organizations aren't going to hold a copy of a credit card. They're going to hold a token that allows them to bill that credit card again and again and again, but they don't hold the full details of the credit card themselves. And I think we need that sort of approach when it comes to these key documents. And once the verification's done, that should be it. hopefully.
Well, we're so often asked to give our information up. Like, you can't even book a ticket or a show or movie or anything like that without having to give up your credit card number and the expiry date and the CVC on the back. You have to. So, I mean, you're immediately exposing yourself as an individual, whatever way you interact with anything. And unfortunately, individuals still can't really be responsible for their own security. So, the rules are changing very quickly, and these companies have a big responsibility to act. If you think of Pinnacle and Pinnacle Health in the Waikato District Health Board, it's not an individual's problem. It's small and medium business. It's medium business, and as we know, one district health board was compromised when another wasn't. So somebody's view of the systems needs a bit of a rethink. And we are, as we'll talk some more about CompTIA, globally out of the communities that we have, the idea of cybersecurity insurance for partners is coming up again and again in terms of who's actually at fault, who did Latitude use, what went wrong in the structure of the cybersecurity matrix of products that they use to stay protected, and what actually did go wrong.
Now, that's obviously something that's very much had a local impact in New Zealand. But looking out internationally, we've heard the news that Intel co-founder Gordon Moore has passed away at 94. Now, obviously, a name that many of our listeners will be very familiar with, especially because of Moore's Law being named after him. What has Moore's Law sort of meant to you throughout your time within the technology sector? Because it's been a predictor of increase in computing power since I actually can't remember when it started out. I will have a look and share that. But this idea of the doubling of transistors on chips, and we really saw it really lead to this exponential growth in computing power. Well, I guess it can be debated. Was it Moore's Law that kind of helped push things forward, or was it that things were going to move forward at that pace even if Moore's Law didn't exist?
Yeah, no, it's true. I think without telling everybody just exactly how old I am, obviously Moore's Law was very relevant in the early years of my tech career, because we were always trying to push the boundaries of what a device could do. And in my earliest days of technology, I'd be trying to rock up to somebody with an IBM compatible computer in their office, and it would take me 2 hours to install the runtime of Windows that I'd need to actually show them what a GUI looked like, and then 12 floppy disks of PageMaker to put in there. I'd get down to the last one and I'd run out of room, and then I'd have to go into the DOS console and try and remove files. And it was a 3 or 4 hour process just to give one demonstration of some software. So obviously with those really high demand usages like Photoshop and desktop publishing, we needed that processing power to enable the true capabilities of the software we were taking to market. And really it was something that ran for many years. This doubling of power meant that every 2 years we could recommend reasons why companies should replace the hardware they got. And, as a hardware salesman, it was a very good time. So thank you, Gordon, I have to say.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because we largely, I think, most organizations move to replace computers after 3 years. Most warranties are 3 years. There are some aspects obviously that have changed. We're not really relying on Moore's Law now. We're not seeing that doubling of computing performance or transistors in a microchip every 2 years in the same way we were. And I guess it's not just in computers. We look at, say, I was having a look at some of the new Samsung phones this week, and the difference between last year's model and this year's model, it's quite minor in a lot of cases, and we're seeing that with a lot of technology. So I think it made it very, very easy to have that discussion, because the pace of improvement was so fast, but it's not as much, but it's still very helpful. A device that's 3 years old is still, often, particularly in a business scenario where it plays into someone's productivity, right? It's a little bit different in a home situation where, it's not necessarily sort of, paying for itself.
Yes.
And so on. But yeah, there are those other aspects around reliability and ability just to run the latest software at pace and make the user productive. That have probably helped keep us in that place where 3 years has largely been the norm. But we see variations where some will stretch it out to 4 or 5 years. But of course, the technology is so much cheaper now too, isn't it?
Oh, it is. And also the way we buy and procure software has changed considerably. I mean, in the early days, it'd be a couple of years between upgrades. I mean, Windows itself would generally be a 3-year cycle. So people were quite ready for the new things that were going to be offered in those products. And they'd also been hyped up for quite a few months prior, as we could see what was going to be possible with the advent of Moore's Law and the new products. But with software as a service now, people are getting dished up features all the time. And it's not in that way where you really know what's happened yet. I think of, something ubiquitous like Microsoft Word that I never, I've learned how to touch type over the years just to be able to be more productive. But now I don't type at all. I mean, I just dictate to Word and copy it from there into emails. And if people haven't checked out the dictate in Microsoft Word at the moment, I suggest they do so. It's bloody good. They've got Nuance, which was the product that you may remember as OmniPage and Dragon's Naturally Speaking. So, they were clunky and very processor intensive in the early years. And now they're so built into the software, you don't even know they're there. So most of my career has been showing people potential of software and what they can do with it. And these incremental upgrades with software that you don't know mean that people don't know what to do. So Windows 11 has just come out with the least fanfare of any Windows I remember in the last 30 years, and people don't even realize they're on it. So that sort of makes it difficult, I suppose, for marketers to have breakout features like we used to do. Like really success was founded on the fact that I'd show people how to attach text to a circle, and there'd be claps and applause from the audience for that one little feature. And, we're a much more complicated world now.
Yeah, we really are. Now, I guess, looking at that, looking at it Intel, comparing the other players and in that chip making space. I mean, the world has become very complicated, and Intel have certainly had their ups and downs. They're certainly not in the place they were a decade or two ago. The ARM based chips that we see across our mobile devices, across the Apple devices that many of us use, laptops and all of the Macs and the like, has changed that whole picture. And now we've got, I guess, the geopolitical challenges coming in, where there's chips being made in China, but the US is wanting to make sure that they've got good supply and that they're not at a disadvantage as the world changes around them. So it's a very fascinating space when it comes to the role of the microchip. Just so ubiquitous, right? We're all. I don't know that we could probably, if we roll back 30 years, if we could have imagined the technology that we have today, the smartphone sitting in our pockets, or Bluetooth earbuds with chips in them that can run for hours and hours, and just how much electricity that we needed to run a computer, and the big CRT monitors, and
that's right.
Was it typically a mega RAM at that stage? So I think it's very fascinating, the role of where sort of Moore's Law fits in, and how looking back, the role that it has played, but also the overall role of technology compared to sort of where we've landed today.
Yeah, I think we've all been through quite a number of what I call the hype cycles, or lots of people have called them that, from the graphical user interface. And obviously then in the late 90s, we started to get the internet, network computers, backup and storage. Then we went into cloud, then we went into internet and Google search. All of those are quite big things, but I don't think they're, paradigm shifting necessarily. All they have become now is complications for small and medium business partners to navigate, because there's only so much time in the day, and to keep up with all of them is virtually impossible. So most of the, members of CompTIA, if you like, that are in the reselling of products and services are having to adapt really quickly. The supply chain issues that have been affected by the geopolitical things you refer to has meant that their business model is not sustainable necessarily. And if they have to wait, that whole month's sales might be out the window. And it's that supply chain and, people staffing challenges of today that make it a really difficult landscape, really, for a small and medium business reseller in New Zealand to thrive. And I think, we look at most of them have $1 million turnover and 10 staff. I mean, you can make a small business work with that. But ultimately, are they being safe, responsible, reliable, and trustworthy for all those clients in terms of this technology landscape we're in? And most of that's being driven by the ability of software developers to solve a problem very quickly. And I think the apps generation on an iPhone has led to business apps. Microsoft's Azure Marketplace means any reseller can access products and solutions from anywhere in the world and sell them, and obviously leverage the opportunity they present. But most are too small to have the time to do that. So it's not an easy landscape at the moment, with inflation and recession fears and staff movements and quiet quitting, which is where people are quickly taking a job that someone's offering them more money, and there's just not enough people to fill the gap. 15,000 shortages in the IT industry in New Zealand alone, and an immigration policy that isn't really supportive of bringing in the skills we need. So New Zealand Inc. is a bit at risk here, I think.
Yeah, you're right. Now, you mentioned CompTIA. This is an organisation that you've been involved in. Tell us a little bit about your role and where sort of CompTIA fits into the broader picture, because it stands for Computer Technology Industry Association. So it's actually quite broad, isn't it?
Yeah, it is broad. It's a global organisation that's been set up to do two things. One is to do vendor agnostic certifications and course development. So, increasingly in the world today, employers are trying to upskill people that are looking to embrace their career and go further into certain tech areas, or to allow people to get access to skills training that's not necessarily a 4-year university course, which we'll talk some more about. But CompTIA itself sells $80 million worth of IT course certifications worldwide, second only to Microsoft on the planet, really. And obviously Microsoft's training is for their own product. So the leader in the world, I suppose, for tech enablement courses, which are sold in New Zealand through many of the training organizations. But that money that they make, they invest back into the industry. So I sit on the community side, and that's a non-profit part of the global organization. Very, very strong in networking for the industry in America and in Europe, UK. Not so known in New Zealand from the community side, because we're a small country. So I've stepped up to be the ANZ executive member for New Zealand, along with Greg Sharp. And we are working with the exec in Australia to develop community events that anyone in the tech industry can come along and enjoy from a networking perspective and meeting people similarly, but mostly with that agnostic approach. Most of the events we go to are product-led or led by a vendor's messaging, which you've got to sift through to figure out what's really going on. And in terms of the COVID period, the timing for back in-person events is, really about people getting to know people and talking to people about problems that they've got. And it's not as much the themes of the actual community events as is the networking, what goes on outside and around that. So we're only been active in New Zealand for about three years. We only get 3-year term as a councillor. And we really are just starting to ramp up again in New Zealand, mainly just in Auckland. I mean, I'm hoping I might get a Wellington event away later in the year. But our next meeting in New Zealand is on May 18th. And as I said earlier, it's purely non-vendor, but it's looking at cybersecurity insurance this time, and obviously, as we'll talk some more about the AI trends and what that means for small partners trying to take advantage of a technology that's, right at the peak of the hype cycle, I suppose. And hopefully they haven't slipped into the trough of disillusionment yet. We'll see how we go.
Yeah. Now on that cyber security and data privacy, we were talking about it before. ChatGPT, this is kind of the exciting buzz at the moment, but ChatGPT actually have fallen foul of this.
Yes, they have.
So some dramas there. They've put a little bit of blame on some open source code that they're using, but quite a shock. In fact, it was an event today, walking an organization through a futurist mindset and then into a workshop around a broad range of AI tools, but with a certainly a very heavy focus on ChatGPT, because that's the product of the moment. And I had to say to them, look, you've got to be really careful what you feed into these tools, because you can't be 100% sure that if you're putting your intellectual property up there, where that might go. And so sort of discussing some of those sort of approaches. Now, what we understand in ChatGPT's case, I think somewhere between sort of 1% and 2% of users were impacted and potentially had somebody else seeing their info. Now, that could have been what they were putting in terms of prompts at the chat, things that they were asking for, or credit card details and personal account details. So a bit of a shocker of a situation. But another thing that caught me about this, and we've seen it in other circumstances, is we're always becoming sort of quite blasé around cyber incidents, because there's just so many.
There are too many,
and it's it's a little bit hard to get your head around that. It's just like, oh yeah, another day, another cyber incident.
It's risk and reward, Paul.
It's
like,
a shocker.
how much opportunity do we get to make a difference with these tools versus the risk of opening ourselves up to exploitation. But in terms of the hype cycles we've seen, I was just reading Bill Gates's notes from Bill today.
Yes,
he was just talking about how he feels the same about AI tools, the way that he felt when he first saw the GUI and what that would mean for computing, and putting that on top of his DOS system. He was ecstatically excited. He talked of not so much the tool itself, but the opportunities it's got to, I guess, level the inequality in terms of health and education worldwide, which is a thing that, if you think about, is extremely unequal. So, ChatGPT and AI and the various tools can enable countries to improve their health delivery or education. I think we have to explore it, exploit it, and obviously do all we can to sort of get that globalization story a bit more balanced. And I believe that's what's coming.
Yeah, we could spend a lot of time here talking about AI at the moment, but interesting that you should mention Bill Gates's post, which is up at gatesnotes.com, and it's called "The Age of AI Has Begun." And I think it is worth a read. I haven't actually read all of it myself, so I do need to catch up on that and get the full thoughts. But I really do believe that this is a very, very big shift in technology, that it's hard to work out what you can actually compare it with and how it plays out. I think we all need to be watching it pretty closely and looking at how and where is it appropriate to apply this technology. What are the associated risks? But how do we get good outcomes from the latest technology for society, and back down to individually, how do we help our ourselves and our families do well because we're using technology appropriately?
Yeah, well, I think, everybody needs to find within their organizations a champion. When I was working at Microsoft, we'd always try and find a eager beaver inside the organization that was interested in what these features could do, how they could apply to the business, and then they'd show the others how to do it. So, early adopters in terms of wearing my MTech hat is what I love the most. And you're a good, futurist in terms of bringing some of these technologies to people's notice. But in terms of making them real, you've really got to start exploring them quite soon. I mean, already we're, well to 2 or 3 years into this. It's not new. It isn't at all new, actually. It's really maturing quickly, but there are applications for everybody, not just health and education, although I don't really think universities will exist in the model that they are at the moment. I mean, why go to university for 4 years if you can do a CompTIA certification course in cybersecurity and get a job within 3 weeks? So that must upend the traditional model of health education delivery. And the same with health. I think we still don't have that single health record where individuals can be responsible for their own health pathway, and learning about that is, we're well past Dr. Google, let's say, if you're wondering how to manage your own health direction. So these are the good things. We have to approach it from the fortune that can come, not the fear. And I think the hype is attracting fear and fearmongers about what it will mean and the future of AI, and obviously talking about the Terminator and the world will be taken over by robots. I mean, like, get real. But it is something to consider.
Yeah, look, I think it's important to sort of walk through these things and and get your head around them. And yeah, as you say, there's that value in having one or more individuals that are going to take the lead and help drive these things inside our organisations. I think it's really important to our broader success as New Zealand. We have often really punched above our weight, done really well in certain areas, and we've seen that with the broader tech sector where I think where are we now? Maybe number 3 in terms of biggest export earnings sort of generation. Tech's moving up, but the Technology Investment Network have said, look, we're not too far off from tech potentially being our number 1 export earner. But of course, most of our firms don't see themselves as tech firms, but actually the opportunities of utilizing tech inside every organization, to a degree, says, well, actually, every firm is a tech firm to one degree or another. And so, we have to bring this into, to all our organizations and be making sure we're not getting left behind. And sometimes we've really innovated so well as a country. And of course, that comes down to individuals and teams that have helped really push through. Rocket Lab, of course, one of our most, I think, exciting stories in recent years, but there's a whole bunch more. We've got to make sure that we keep sort of pushing the barriers and pushing forward on these things. So
I think keeping up with it is getting so much harder for everybody. Which just speaking about CompTIA again, we have 5 global priorities as part of the vision for the organization, which is around cybersecurity, clearly, managed service providers and how to help them thrive in this complicated market. But the third big pillar is around emerging tech, or MTech, and helping people see through the various trends we're seeing, blockchain and AI and all the other things that might or might not be relevant, to try and help them navigate through. And I mean, really, I often talk of myself as a futurist, a bit like yourself, but all I'm really trying to do is help people see the output that can be gained from some of these new tools as it applies to them. So, the role's really an educator, helping people to not have that fear and to have the confidence to explore. And when you look at some of the things and the practical examples of seeing ChatGPT demonstrated and all the other AI, I mean, it's not just the only one. People are immediately seeing the applications, and then they can start to work on what they might do to monetize that. And linking that back to the theme of time and how limited we all have it. At my age, I'm running out of time with 20 good summers left, they say. I am trying to make companies understand how much time is lost. And so one of the project partners' goals is if people that are working from home, don't get stressed about that. Let them have that lifestyle option, but make sure they fill out their timesheet so you can either apply that work to a project and tasks that you can monetize, or at least to gather the intel about where they are spending their time, because we have got a couple of government departments and their only requirement of staff is 24 hours billable against a 40-hour paid working week. And you think, well, really, what are they doing for all that rest of that time? So it's quite easy to slip a timesheet opportunity in front of a company and say, well, if everybody just put their time in against things we do, marketing, sales, meetings, planning, you get a much bigger and clearer picture of where your profitability is. And I think in the end, everybody has to focus on the business criteria and profitability, whatever they are, whatever business they're in, and know how to pull those levers. And I think Mercury is one of our biggest clients, use it for interdepartmental billing when they're charging to another department, which happens quite a lot in these bigger organizations. And so I just feel like we've got such a short amount of time. You've got to make the most of it, but be very specific about where you're going, what you stand for, and the storytelling behind each and every brand that we meet. So it's a very crowded marketplace, the tech industry. But what I love is these software as a service companies. I mean, I don't know if you've been to any of the Kiwi SaaS meetings, but they're just hotbeds of ideas and technology challenges and how they're overcoming them and what their big idea is and what they're going to solve worldwide. And you would think that they'd be happening in other parts of the world, but that New Zealand innovation thinking is quite a unique thing in our country. That it's great to see that being embraced and these problems being solved. And Velocity, Vista, there's so many stories of software companies in New Zealand that are going global. And I mean, I just love and applaud their efforts.
Yeah, actually, interesting you should mention Kiwi SaaS, because this week they have Southern SaaS taking place. And apologies, I've let the entire side down by mentioning it now because it's now sold out. There is a wait list, so there might be an opportunity still get in, but it looks like a really exciting event. And I think, look, it shows us that government can get in and really make a difference. And New Zealand Trade and Enterprise sort of sit behind Kiwi SaaS, or they're hosting it, and Callaghan Innovation are involved there as well, right? So and many listeners will know Brett Roberts, who's a regular on the show as well. So there's a whole bunch of people involved there, but really exciting to have an event like this and to bring people together to learn from and inspire each other. And certainly in terms of if we look at this future that we're hearing about for New Zealand, the SaaS or software as a service sector needs to keep developing and growing, and we need to learn from those that have been successful at taking products out onto the global stage. And so I'm very much looking forward to to getting some time there on Thursday and seeing what I can learn. So if you are about the event, definitely feel free pop up and say hi if you see me wandering around.
Good idea. Yeah. I think your New Zealand managed service providers or resellers really are needing to diversify somewhat, and I think the partnerships with a number of the organizations in Kiwi SaaS will be something we'll see a lot more of as we sort of put that Rubik's Cube together of products and solutions, because the developers of these software products need channels, and they eventually will need one. Most of them are going direct in the beginning, but ultimately for scale, they need that. And I think many MSPs could take the products that are being developed in New Zealand and add them to their portfolio of products that they sell, perhaps prematurely in terms of where the vendors are at, but certainly another revenue stream to explore. I mean, many of them apply to all kinds of different business sizes. So, get in early and get that revenue stream growing from these partnerships. So, everyone should go along to Kiwi SaaS. Big fan. I'm a member myself, so I have to say it. Yeah. And Brett's an old friend, so why wouldn't we?
Excellent. So, a couple of other things to cover off. I'm just trying to think what we're going to squeeze in. TikTok keeps being in the news, and of course their CEO has been at what is it, a congressional hearing type situation. Speaking grilled by Congress sort of scenarios that we're seeing again with their folks. I'm seeing a range of interesting commentary coming through. One report out of Australia saying that, hey, TikTok cannot be considered a private company just because of how tightly things are linked to the Chinese Communist Party, which I think some people would maybe struggle to take that on board and suggest that there's ulterior motives and it's very much political. Some of the pushback on TikTok. Personally, I'm pretty concerned about varying aspects to do with TikTok. So I think we've got a time of some sort of turbulence ahead as the US tries to work out what they're going to do, and I guess my hope is that whatever happens works out well for New Zealand, because we're just sitting off to the sidelines, right? I mean, we don't have much oomph at this stage unless the government really feels that it's a major deal. But we're such a small percentage of their user base. New Zealand, as such, probably has very limited amount of power. That said, we have sometimes seen smaller countries be able to make an impact globally by taking a stand one direction or another, taking some leadership, and sometimes others will follow. But I imagine there'll be some debate there as to how folks feel.
I think because it's a consumer product, the actual users of the software don't actually care that much. In terms of business use, if you think of something like Kaspersky, that basically a friend of mine from HP was running that across ANZ, and the business went away overnight with that anti-Russia sentiment. And so that brings us back to just thinking carefully about the products and things that are being used and what could be behind them. I mean, ultimately, that cybersecurity threat is not because of things in New Zealand as a rule. So that's fair. But ultimately, if we think of our global market and that we're all people, these geopolitical things will continue to interfere in multiple ways that life will never be the same again. It's a shame, really, because we've been debating whether TikTok should have a place in our business marketing strategy on numerous occasions, along with all the other options. But that channel, if you like, for storytelling has found its place in TikTok. So what does that tell us about the way people behave and what they like to use? And I always talk in marketing with clients, you're not really creating content. You're trying to create content that people will share on your behalf. Hashtags and shareable videos. Your podcast is an example of content that people can give to do good, is what we really want to get to. So maybe it's a platform that won't be around too much longer based on the geopolitical structure we've talked of.
I'm not sure it's gonna go away. There might be some structural changes, ownership changes, and other bits and pieces. But that certainly is one option, that it might go away in a market or what have you. But we'll see how it plays out. But putting on the sort of the business hat, if you're a business owner or someone trying to build a personal brand, become an influencer, there's a whole lot of scenarios whereby TikTok is an absolutely brilliant platform to be using. So you might hear from me some some negative feeling towards some of their cybersecurity and other practices. Look, if you're creating content, that's where the audience is right now. So you have to find your way through that and figure out how to take advantage of what's relevant at the moment.
Just the
Now,
hype cycle again. You know, I think
yeah,
we've slipped into the trough of disillusionment with TikTok, but we'll see what happens in the next year or so, eh?
yeah. Now I saw news headlines through the BBC around Lindsay Lohan and Jake Paul being hit with charges from the Security and Exchange Commission in the US over crypto scheme that they and a number of others sort of got in and promoted without necessarily there being the appropriate transparency to say, actually, we're promoting this because we do well if you follow our links or what have you, whatever the exact scenario was there. I think I think that maybe they were given sort of set specific fees to to promote this stuff, but
Probably.
not a great scenario. But in the last few days, I've seen I have an Instagram account for those that are curious or Instagram users. It's at Paul Spain NZ, so it's different to my other ones. It's got the NZ on because by the time I got around to Instagram, somebody I think in Spain or in Europe had snaffled that one. But the scenario that I've got now is one whereby I'm seeing that there are fake accounts that are popping up that look as though they're my profile because they've basically duplicated my picture, my name, a little bit of a write up and so on, and then they go out and start trying to connect with people that they know I know through other social media platforms and Instagram, and so on. So the one I was looking at today, I don't know, had attracted a couple of hundred or so followers, and as far as I can tell, pretty reasonably short space of time. There was one last week which a number of people reported, and it didn't get shut down. In order to get that shut down, I had to form, and I was kind of curious to see whether this was the appropriate action, but I wanted to sit back a couple of days, hoping most of my followers are reasonably switched on and weren't going to get scammed. And look, it's not a platform I have any huge following on at all. But I just sort of sat back because people were saying, "Oh, we've reported this, we reported it." So a number of people were reporting it back to Meta, and the interesting thing was that Meta's algorithms, AI, whatever their process was for looking at that account, which had been reported, is very clear that it was using the same photo that my official account had, and that the information was duplicated. It's somewhat head scratching that after 48 hours, with multiple people reporting the account, that their technology wasn't smart enough to be able to go, that is very, very, very highly likely to be a scam scenario.
Yeah, I wonder why they don't actually, sort of have a net that must be able to be set up to protect the individuals like yourself that do already have a profile, and then make it almost faceless of them to make it easy to find out and get help, especially as individuals, because many of the social network users that are listening would probably have had their Facebook or their Insta hacked as well.
Yeah, I don't think it's unique to me, and as I say, it's not like I have any sort of large following on there in the broader scheme of things. But it's odd to me that probably you bring together a couple of developers, computer scientists, what have you. You kind of look at it, and you think, I think I could probably largely solve this issue. Not necessarily. I'm sure there are complexities to it, but hold on, this account, it's got the same name and the same photo. It's coming from a different country, or it's there are enough things that indicate that it's a copy, and then there will be very common indicators in terms of what the usage habits are with those things. Oh, a bunch of people are now getting messaged in a reasonably short space of time, and and whatnot, right? So
identity theft thing, really, when you think of what what they're doing. They've got the algorithms watching for content and obviously, abhorrent content being posted. So, they're intervening very quickly on the things that they think matter. They're not intervening very quickly when it comes to identity protection. And I think that'll be something that you will hear more.
Yeah, look, and look, I brought this up with Meta, and they were here in the office just in the last 3 weeks or so, and I put some questions to them of which interestingly, following that discussion, I don't recall having seen a lot back on the hard questions that were asked. I'm sure they're very busy and they've been laying off people, and it's very complicated. And they have previously talked about the number of fake accounts and so on that they have, that their algorithms do clamp down on, which is great. But of course, we don't see that information on a daily basis. What you see is where someone has broken into a friend's account, and maybe at some stage we'll have Peter Griffin back on the show. In fact, I think he's got a listener article maybe coming up around his Facebook account being compromised and taken over. But it does seem as though that they've got some issues that they could address. Now, one of the ways in which they're doing this is they're moving to a monetized model. So, and following in the footsteps of Twitter, you can pay for a verified account, and they're saying, look, that's going to help protect you against these sort of scenarios. Now, I can see that's pretty wise from a revenue generation perspective. Very much, I guess you look at it as an insurance policy, right? Because you got to pay up front. One of the questions I have put to them in the past is, look, people have lost their accounts, can spend weeks or months trying to get their accounts back. In some cases, never do. Why don't you have something where people can pay, even if it's $500 to have that opportunity? Now, of course, that then creates an issue because there's a bunch of people that aren't going to be able to necessarily afford that. But I think there's plenty of opportunity ahead for our social media companies to still innovate and to figure out and solve some of these problems that we've been seeing for years and years and years. So
I think it comes back to the influence. If you're going to have an audience and you're going to have influence, you've really got to sort of take care of that. I mean, really, as a person that is quite social and a bit of an influencer, I'm not sure that I'd trust Lindsay Lohan as a guide to my cryptocurrency procurement, but you can't protect stupid all the time.
Yeah, look, but you think about it. Well, someone with that sort of profile, you would think, well, they or an advisor to them must have done their research if they're posting about something. But and I guess to join up the dots, I've been asked of, well, why would anybody want to compromise your account pool? What would be the benefit of that?
Yes.
And what we're what we know is it tends to be around being able to promote crypto scams, or whatever the scam is, but usually something investment related. And so if someone gets access to your network and you're trusted, and whether that's that you've got a small network or a large network, if you've got trusted people and you can convince somebody or multiple people in your network to make an investment, that can be a very, very good play for or a very evil play, but can be a successful play for a criminal. So
well, there's a global market for it, isn't there? And if you think back right to the beginning, what we talked about, that idea of security and cybersecurity and who actually is protecting you, you've got to start with protecting yourself as much as possible with the way we set up our passwords and the way we change them more frequently, and generally try not to use the same one for everything, to make it easier for them to take advantage of that, as well as your profile, which clearly is yours. But with deep fakes and with AI coming soon, we'll have a chatbot AI generated Paul Spain that you will probably do the podcast without you soon.
No, this is too much fun. The last story, I just wanted to give it a mention. it hasn't really got a lot of coverage, but I just thought, boy, this is the sort of thing that we hear about as a possibility. And the Register wrote a story on it that China sought control of submarine cables in order to spy, according to the outgoing president of Micronesia. So just, there's all sorts of, rabbit holes going on, but, we've heard of these sort of concerns, and we've seen scenarios whereby, the ownership needs to be in a particular way for the submarine fiber optic cables to be able to be put in place between, for instance, New Zealand and the US. And now we're hearing some interesting accusations here. And for those that are curious about these sorts of things, you may want to go and look that one up for a few more details. But certainly the world seems to be getting more and more complex by the day.
It does. I think sometimes it's nice to be a little island down the bottom of the world where we can just get on and have a great summer, hopefully, without interference too much. But I think the Battle of the South China Sea is an example of just how, geopolitical factors are going to always be influencing the direction of the world as we go. So, we have to take care in everything that we do.
We do indeed. That's good. Well, I think we've sort of, we've covered off and delved a bit into your work with CompTIA and ProjectPartner. So that's great. If folks are wanting to find out a little bit more, where would they go to find out more in both those cases?
Yeah, well, I think CompTIA is the one I'm really sort of keen to promote today, just because if anyone is in the IT industry, they can register to become a member of CompTIA for free. And they just do that by going to CompTIA.org and registering their personal details, hopefully safely.
I'm going there now, Warwick.
But the global corporate membership, of which Microsoft, Ingram Micro, Red Hat, and others buy for their global companies, are available for purchase, and it just gives access to far more of the in-depth research that they do, more about the certifications. Gets companies discounts on courses if they're wanting to do some professional development of their teams, and obviously invitations to the community events that we do. So, as I said, the next one's coming up on May 18th here in Auckland at Microsoft, and we'll be looking at a couple of the themes that we've discussed today. So, cybersecurity insurance, and how can an MSP take advantage of some of the AI tools that are out there. ProjectPartner, I guess, is my favorite thing to talk about, but we're not here to talk about products today. But if anyone is interested in what their people do with their time, or are interested in simple tools to do the time capture, they should get in touch.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, thanks for coming in, Warwick. Always good to catch up. It is often,
Yes.
a few years in between times.
Hopefully I've still got a few more left in me yet. It's, most of my friends are obviously retiring now as I fast approach 60, but just for the listeners out there, I'm the 16th fastest marathon runner in New Zealand. So trying to keep that health and fitness up to allow the mind to stay agile to all these trends and futuristic things we need to talk about. But thank you for the podcast, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, great to see you, and congratulations. It's actually been fun following your successes there with running. That's awesome.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much, Paul.
Thanks, Warwick. And thank you again to our show partners, to Vodafone, 2 Degrees, Spark, HP, and Gorilla Technology for their support of the New Zealand Tech Podcast, keeping us going. And we'll be back again with you again next week. All right. See ya.
Bye.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.